Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe if you have a friend, a colleague, relative, associate, enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Now look, there's quite a few cards on this weekend. There are some very interesting matchups, but before we get to that, this Friday, so tonight, there is a card taking place at the Caribe Royale in Florida. And it's a most valuable prospects card, so anyone who knows, that's like the I guess the next gen series that Matchroom used to do, but it's for MVP promotions, you know, Jake Paul, Nikisa Badarian, Amanda Serrano, etc. The only reason I bring it up is because Daniel Pero, aka The Fear, is on the card tonight. And I only sort of bring him up because most people will know that he is the brother of Lenny Apero, who recently just signed a co-promotional deal with Matchroom Boxing. He fought back in April, got a 10-round unanimous decision. I guess that was his Matchroom debut, so to speak. Danny Apero has been on several of these MVP cards, so I don't know if he's actually signed to them or if he's just getting consistent work because it is taking place in Florida where he's based. It'll be interesting, but I want to see how he kind of gets on tonight against Cesar Navarro, just to see if obviously he is a free agent. Maybe it's worth you know, putting a little bit of money behind him. Maybe, you know, if Frank Warren at Queensby wants to soak up some more heavyweights, or maybe if Eddie Hearn wants to bolster his stable a little bit more, try and do like maybe the Klitschko brothers of the Cuban variety or something like that. It'd be interesting. Also, Natalie Dove, aka Nat No Love Dove, is taking on Nayeli Rodriguez. Both ladies, I believe, are 4-0. No, sorry, Nat I believe is 5-0 and Nayeli is 4-0. So again, as a prospects card goes, it's quite an interesting feat, so I'm keen to see how that plays out. With that being said, three fairly big cards to get to tonight, so yeah, without further ado, let's get to the picks. Okay, so look, we're going to kick it off with the Queensbury card taking place at the Motorpoint Arena in Nottingham. Very unfortunate that I wasn't able to attend. I always like going to the Motorpoint, and Nottingham is one of my favorite destinations, so yeah, but you know, maybe next time. That being said, I'm not going to go through all the fights on the card because Queensbury cards usually have about 12 to 13 bouts starting from 3 p.m. all the way up to like midnight most of the time. But the first one I kind of want to look at is Owen Cooper versus Chris Kongo. Now, Owen Cooper had an all-out brawl with Echo Esserman, knocked him down. It was a pretty, you know, it was a pretty gutsy performance on both sides. However, Echo Esserman managed to rally back. I think it was the very last round he managed to get the stoppage victory after, I think he knocked Cooper down in the 11th in that fight and then managed to get a stoppage in the 12th. So it was one of those back and forth. It was considered like one of the British fights of the year last year, but he's back and he's facing Chris Kongo. Now Owen Cooper is actually, I believe, posted as the A side in this fight. Very intriguing. Chris Kongo fought his last fight up at 154 but has since come back down to 147. So nope, I commit 147. I'm a welterweight and that's where I want to be, and I can see where he's coming from because that's where like seems to be all of the big names are starting to appear. You know, all of the Americans are starting to move to that weight. You've got Conor Benn who's just coming back. Echo Esserman is always a good shout if he can get past Josh Taylor, and if he can't, Josh Taylor's definitely a big name. So all in all, I think this fight's going to be pretty spirited. I'm not really going to go into, you know, keys to victory and all that stuff. I haven't got enough time. However, I do think Chris Kongo, with the extra experience and having been in there primarily with a slightly better grade of opposition, whether win or loss, I think that plus the size and the ability to keep his opponent at range, I think is going to be what gets him this fight. Now I don't think he'll be able to get a stoppage over Owen Cooper, just because I don't think Cooper's going to get too reckless and run into like one of those big the big straight rights that Chris Kongo can deliver. But I do think he will win a competitive yet fairly comfortable unanimous decision victory. Ezra Taylor versus Troy Jones. Now, I believe this is supposed to be chief support. I know that they've been calling it co-main parts of the broadcast, but then other parts have said no, it's chief support. It's not a co-main to the main event. But look, it's a light heavyweight bout. It's another quote-unquote step up for Ezra Taylor. Troy Jones 12-0, so he's actually got one more professional fight than Ezra Taylor. He's 6 KOs of his 12 victories. So 50% versus Ezra Taylor, who has 11 fights. He's 11-0, and I believe he has 8. I think he's got 8 KOs on his record. So obviously he is, I guess, the slightly bigger puncher just by those stats. Troy Jones actually looks the slightly bigger of the two in terms of height, but I think Ezra's got a slightly longer reach. Now they're friends, they've sparred each other. One obviously Nottingham to Birmingham connection, so they know each other quite well. And so even though it was respectful, it was sort of like still respectfully spicy in a bit of the press conferences and build up. I am going to trust the schoolings of Ezra Taylor on this one. This is his first fight of Malik Scott as well in his corner. While I'm not saying that is a major plus or a negative on either side, I just think that his overall will to win, his athleticism and his ability to be able to kind of work things out on the fly, even though he's not like a natural born boxer, I think is quite impressive, and I think that will be what manages to get him this victory. And I think due to that he will come through, and I do think he will get a points decision. I think Jones will be game enough to be able to navigate and get through the rounds. I believe it's a 10 rounder. I think it's Ezra's first 10 rounder in fact. So I think Troy Jones is going to have enough to kind of get through it overall, but I do think that Ezra Taylor will win, probably a unanimous decision, but it'll probably be a bit tricky in spots. Liam Davis versus Kurt Walker, real quick one. Liam Davis is moving up to featherweight, first fight at featherweight. He's 16-1. I think Kurt Walker is 12-0, but he's only got 2 KOs. So that obviously tells me that they're kind of giving Liam Davis someone who's maybe going to be a bit of a tricky operator, but isn't going to be someone that's a big puncher that he's really got to worry about. So I expect Liam Davis to be able to take the center of the ring, sort of get his arms moving quite quickly, get in, get out, and ultimately just be too much for Kurt Walker. And I do expect him to stop him in about 7 rounds or less. That's kind of what I'm predicting. Now, main event, Anto Cacace versus Leigh Wood. Now, Leigh Wood ain't been in the ring for 19 months. At the age of 36 now, that means his last fight he was 34. Father Time is undefeated, but Father Time is also definitely he definitely likes those that, especially the ones that are inactive. Now yes, he might have been in the gym, but there's no substitute for the real thing, no substitute for the bright lights. And we also know, as much as he's got heart and he has got that dog and a bit of recovery in him, the chin sometimes is a bit questionable. Now, coming from 126 up to 130, Anto Cacace isn't the biggest of punchers, but I have heard that he hits incredibly hard for someone who doesn't have a lot of knockouts on his record. I've actually heard that he's probably one of the hardest hitters at 130 pounds. Not sure how true that is, but I can only go by the word of people that have, been in the ring and tasted the power. Now, Leigh Wood is also a huge puncher. I don't think Anto Cacace has been in the ring with someone who hits as hard as Leigh Wood. I mean, possibly Cordina, you might say, but considering that he was killing himself to make 130 pounds, maybe there wasn't as much energy and mustard in the shots as previous. So I'm not sure. What I will say is I do think that Leigh Wood, of the two, is the slightly better technically, but he also does make mistakes, especially the fact that he likes to go for the knockout. He will leave himself in vulnerable positions to sometimes try to achieve that, and he will go hook for hook with an opponent, which is how we ended up getting floored by Mauricio Lara in their first fight. So I think with the inactivity, it's going to be an uphill battle for Leigh Wood. I think it's going to be a very spirited and a very hard fought fight in the first sort of half of the fight, first half, the first 2/3. But I do think the activity level plus Cacace being the naturally bigger guy of the two, not by much but enough, and also being a little bit taller, I do think that the size advantage overall is going to play into Cacace's hands. And as he doesn't, it's not easy for him to make weight, but he doesn't kill himself to make it either. So I feel like he will still be comfortable at that 130. And I think because of all of that, he will ultimately get the victory. I think it's going to go points. I don't think Leigh Wood's getting knocked out, especially not in Nottingham, or again, at least not on this particular occasion. But yeah, I think that it will be Anthony Cacace retaining his IBO super featherweight title for whatever that's worth. Okay, so next you've got Erickson Lubin taking on Ardil Holmes. Now this is actually a Pro Box card taking place. It'll be on Pro Box YouTube, and I think it will also be on Argentina Tyke Sports in the South of America. Erickson Lubin has not fought since September 2023. So to say he's inactive is an understatement. But he's on Pro Box now. Ardil Holmes, I think 17-0. Lubin's 26-2. Holmes has only got 6 KOs on his record. Lubin 18 KOs. Obviously, he's been KO'd twice himself, but he's got that. He's got the experience up at the top level. Yes, he's been inactive, but he's not super old, so it won't be too telling on him right now, I don't think. I think he comes through this, and I actually think he does get the stoppage on Ardil Holmes, and I reckon it probably takes him about 3 or 4 rounds to really warm into the fight, but I think the stoppage comes about around 8 to round 9. That's what I'm gonna predict it to be, especially as Ardil's a little bit taller. I feel like Lubin will try to get underneath the shots, and yeah, sort of work away to the body and then just throw the overhands when he gets into range just on the inside of the jab. Also on that card, you've got Nazarena Romero versus Mayeli Flores, which is, I believe, a fight for a title at Super Bantam. I can't remember exactly, but Mayeli Flores, very, sort of very tough, very game. If I remember correctly, former world champion. I do believe that is the case, but Nazarena Romero, just ultimately, I think this fight comes down to the power of the punch, and Nazarena Romero hits extremely hard. Yeah, when I say extremely hard, like, it's for in the women's division, she's very, very heavy-handed. Doesn't make a lot of adjustments, and that might be the one place where Mayeli Flores is able to sort of get to her and maybe sort of nick a couple of rounds. But ultimately, I think once Nazarena Romero lets those hands go, it's pretty much all she wrote. So yeah, I'm going to go with Nazarena Romero to win, and I'm going to go with a unanimous decision, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a late round stoppage in there, like round 8 or round 9. But yeah, that's all I'm going to really talk about from that Pro Box card, but some good fights on there if you've got the time to watch them. And last but not least, we're going to go to the top rank card, which is also taking place on Saturday night. 2 very interesting bouts at the top of the card. The first one being Raymond Muratalla against Zaur Abdullaev for the interim IBF lightweight title. Anyone who will know sort of Zaur Abdullaev, he's only got 1 loss on his record, and that was to Devin Haney. It was a stoppage defeat in, I believe it was stopped in the 5th round, and it was a case where Devin Haney broke his orbital bone in his face, and he was forced to withdraw from the bout. But since then, he has won, I think he's actually like 9 wins on the bounce since then. 10 wins on the bounce, coming into now his this is his 22nd fight of his career. So obviously he fought Devin Haney very early, when Devin was at the peak of his powers at 135. Now he's facing Raymond Muratalla, who is 22-0 with 17 KOs. So Raymond is a bit more of the puncher of the two. Abdullaev was a bit more of I guess more of a decorated amateur of the two. Older, a bit more experienced, I guess, in terms of just worldly boxing. Whereas obviously Muratalla's got one fight more than him in the pro game, so you might say he's got that bit of experience there as well. This is a really interesting fight for that lightweight interim title of the IBF. Without going into too much detail on how I see the fight breaking out and everything, I do think that Abdullaev gets I think he gets a pretty good groove in the first couple of rounds, like rounds 1, 2 and 3, but I do think that Muratalla hangs with him, especially sort of in the second and the third, and then just being that slightly bigger guy overall, someone that rehydrates just naturally a bit bigger than Abdullaev. I think the power's going to start to take over, and sort of the not so much as the boxing skills, but just the size and the weight advantage, the little bit of the height advantage. I think all of that is going to play into how it sort of goes towards the stretch. Now I do think that Abdullaev is going to be game and be tough all the way through, but I think that Muratalla, especially with it being a top ranked card and him being, you know, one of their next up, it's going to be competitive, but I think the scorecards are going to be quite generous towards Muratalla towards the end of the bout. So I'm expecting to see some maybe 117, 111, 117, 112s, 116, 112 type cards, and I do think Muratalla will win a unanimous decision. Now we've also got Emmanuel Navarrete making his comeback in, and I believe he's facing Charlie Suarez, if I can remember correctly. Now this fight again is a pretty interesting fight in terms of how it's supposed to break down, but again I think just Navarrete's style, the way that he, you know, sort of the way that he you know, sort of the way that he really sort of just has that unorthodox style, the arms, the way that he throws punches from awkward angles, you can't really get around them. I think he's just going to be a bit too unorthodox for Charlie Suarez. Suarez is going to be game. Obviously he's a Philippines fighter, but he's a bit older than Navarrete, and again is a little bit naturally smaller. So I do think with all the unorthodox positioning, I think Navarrete goes to work, and I actually think he does get a stoppage in this fight, and I'm predicting sort of rounds maybe 6 or 7. There's also other fun fights on the card. I know Sebastian Hernandez Reyes is taking on Azat Havanesian. Giovanni Santillon is on the card as well against Angel Bertranvilla, I think his name is. And Andres Cortez is on there against Salvador Jimenez. So that's a bit of a run out type fight, to be honest. So I won't really talk about those, but again, it's another decent card to watch. I would definitely take a look at it if you do have the time. But with that being said, I'm going to leave it there. Those are the picks. Let me know what you guys think down below. If there's any other fights, put those in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer those if I know who the fighters are. But with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. But for right now, that's Basis Picks locked.